Hello knitting friends, I am here today with a tutorial for you on a technique I really like, and I think you will too, for doing a provisional cast on using barber cord, stitch saver, try it on tubing, whatever name you have for this hollow silicone tubing that has become quite popular among knitters for holding live stitches. So the reason for that is if you have live stitches on this tubing, you can just pop the tubing onto the end of your knitting needle and then slide the stitches onto your needle very easily. So a provisional cast on is a technique for creating 2 sets of live stitches. So one set that you're going to work right away, and then another set that you're going to come back to later and work in the opposite direction. So this is an example where I did that recently. This is the Cozy Cottage Cardi that I just started this month, and right here you can see is where the provisional cast on was. So I provisionally cast on these stitches here. I worked this way, then I came back later and worked in the opposite direction. And this is a really handy technique for doing the provisional cast on because it puts your second set of live stitches on the barber cord, stitch saver, whatever, and then when it's time for you to go back to those stitches, you can slide them right onto your needle. So the other common technique for this is to use a crochet chain. I've never had luck with that. You're supposed to be able to unzip your crochet chain to release the live stitches, and mine never unzip. I just end up picking them out. So I really like this technique, and I think you will too. So we're going to start with our length of yarn. You do want to measure off your length of yarn, however long as it needs to be for the number of stitches you're going to cast on. And then we're just going to put a slip knot here. This goes on our barber cord. This is not a stitch. This is just to kind of anchor things as we get going. So I'm going to put that slip knot down toward the end of my barber cord. Then I'm going to hold these two almost as if they're 2 strands of yarn, like you were doing, a tubular cast on or something like that. I'm going to hold them the same way, move that out of the way, and then I'm going to get my needle. And this is actually very simple, so I'm going to kind of hold the end of the barber cord and the end of the yarn here out of the way. And as I said, I'm kind of going to treat this as if these were 2 strands of yarn. So I'm going to go behind the yarn, under the barber cord, then I'm going to go over the yarn and under the barber cord. And now I've got 2 stitches on the needle and on the barber cord. So every time you do behind the yarn, over the barber cord, over the yarn, under the barber cord, every time you do this movement, you get 2 stitches. If for some reason you need an odd number of stitches, when you're done, just slide off the last stitch. That way you won't interrupt sort of building the muscle memory for this movement. So one more time, behind the yarn, over the barber cord, over the yarn, under the barber cord. And you can see 2 stitches for each time I've done that. So I'm going to do a couple more at speed here. And then I'm going to show you how this works. All right. Over, under, over, under. Okay, so now we've got a set of live stitches on our needle. My apologies for my wonky fingernail. Winter is tough. And we've got a set on the barber cord. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and start working the stitches on the needle. So if you're familiar with doing a tubular cast on, this is similar in that you're going to need to knit every other stitch through the back loop because it is oriented on the needle the wrong way. So just going to keep doing that you can see that the stitches on the barber cord are staying on the barber cord while we work the stitches on our needle. So I'm just going to keep going all the way to the end. All right, now I've worked all the way to the end. There's that slip knot. This is not a stitch, but it is helping to create, this loop here that is a pseudo stitch. So that's why we left that there. What I'm going to do now is knit a few rows, and then I'm going to show you what it's like when we release these stitches. So again, I've got stitches on my needle. I've got stitches down here on the barber cord. I'm going to work in this direction, and then I will show you what happens when we release the stitches on the barber cord and see how they look. All right, so here we go. I've knit a few inches. No. All right, so I've knit a few rows. Let's cut my yarn. And here's what we've got. So here's our cast on edge. Here is the knitting I've done, and here are our live stitches still on the barber cord, plus this thing. We don't need this. We're just going to slide this off. It is no longer necessary. All right, so now we can take those live stitches that were on our barber cord, and we're going to pop the tube on the end of the needle, like so, and then just slide the stitches. You do want to be careful that you've got it anchored on there really well so you don't accidentally pull it off. And then we're just going to slide these stitches onto our needle, like so. Okay. Take the tubing off. And here we go. We have a whole nother set of live stitches ready to work. So we will join our yarn, and again, every other stitch is going to be oriented backward. It's going to be the opposite of the first side. So on the first side, it was knit one through the back loop, knit one. On this side, it's knit one, then knit one through the back loop. To fix that orientation, all right, and you can see they look just the same. Now, depending on what stitch pattern you are using, you may get a little line here. That's perfectly normal with any provisional cast on, not just this one. But in this case, the stockinette stitch flows directly into the stockinette stitch, so there won't be any noticeable jog really. But for some other stitch patterns, you might see a little bit of a jog, and again, that's completely normal. But there you go. You got live stitches, no crochet chain, no trouble with unzipping to get your live stitches. They're just there waiting for you on the barber cord, easy to slide onto your needle and start knitting. So as I said, I love this technique for provisional cast-ons. I hope you will also enjoy it and find it easier than some of the other methods. If you did enjoy or find this video useful, I hope you will give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe. New knitting videos here every Saturday. Thanks for checking this tutorial out, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye.